All right. We're going to finish 1 Corinthians 1. I warned you last week. I didn't figure I could do it in half an hour. This is a chapter packed because Paul's talking about what he's going to be talking about for 15 more chapters. And I told you last week, read 1 through 4 and see if we can see how they all tie together. Well, now I'm going to tell you that 1 through 4 and 1 in particular is going to lead us into virtually the rest of the 1 Corinthians. All the rest of the issues really stem from this concept. Last week we were talking about divisions. This week we're going to talk about wisdom and foolishness, or wisdom versus foolishness. 1 Corinthians 1, 18 to 19. The message of the cross seems foolish to those determined to live immorally. However, to us, that same message provides salvation through the power of God. As the scriptures say, I will destroy the wisdom of those who think they are wise, and I will frustrate the intelligence of those who think they are intelligent. That quote is, by the way, from Isaiah 29:14. Paul continues, he says, that is why I will amaze these people by doing an unbelievable thing among them. The wisdom of their wise men will be lost, and the understanding of their sensible men will be hidden. Oh, yeah, that's continuing Isaiah 29:14. Anyway, do people think your faith is foolish? I mean, isn't that what Paul's implying? That people, that your life should demonstrate the message of the cross? And that if your life does portray the message of the cross, then perhaps people might think you are foolish. Have you ever thought about that? On the other hand, let's look at it a little different way. If your life portrays the message of the cross, then you will truly understand that the cross is the very power of God. Something to think about. Don't you think? The message of the cross seems foolish to those who are determined to live immorally. The same message provides salvation through the power of God. Verses 20 to 23, Paul's going to elaborate on that. He says, so where does that leave the highly educated, the truly intelligent, the great debaters in our society? God has now made them look foolish. That is because the wisdom of God demonstrated that the world did not know him. He used our foolish preaching, as others called it, to bring salvation to everyone who believes in him. The Jews demand miracles, and the Greeks look for logical wisdom. So when we preach that Christ was crucified, the Jews can't wrap their minds around it, and the Gentiles consider that ridiculous. Even with modern science and 2,000 years of developing humanity's intelligence since Paul's time, how do we stack up against God today? How do we stack up against God today? For all the advancements we've made, there's a great deal we still cannot explain. Yet so many believe in their intelligence and ignore God's intelligence, even when they cannot explain so many things. And if you want, I'll do a side lesson about evolution versus creation. That alone shows the foolishness of people that, as I often say, Christians believe by faith in an eternally existing God. Evolutionists believe in faith, that there is some dirt or something that was eternally existent. Where did God come from? I don't know. I believe in faith. Where did dirt come from? Well, I don't know. It was just there. That is the start of evolution. So do you realize what Paul's saying here? I mean, think about it. He's saying that regardless of our great wisdom and all our technology and advances in science, that we can never know or understand God, with the implication being except by faith. Paul basically saying we can never prove the existence of God. Isn't it what he said? Yet I've heard plenty of preachers and teachers that try to explain how we can prove God exists. Took a college course on proofs of the existence of God. It was a secular college by a non-believing professor. And I've read plenty of books that try to explain how we can prove God exists. Claiming the Bible proves God exists is wrong, people. The Bible assumes the existence of God. It doesn't try and prove it. It's stated as a fact. You have to accept God by faith. There's no proof. The proofs that I studied in college, they're all, this is evidence that leads us to believe there is a God. You know, Paul doesn't appear to believe that's possible to prove the existence of God. We have to accept it by faith. It seems as though the wiser we become, the less likely we are to need God in our minds. Many people today mock those who have faith in God. The Greeks valued philosophical wisdom above everything, and Jesus' teaching was just too simple for them. They wanted something that was difficult to understand so that only the wisest could understand it. Are you seeking something so great you can't understand? That's what the followers of the Greek philosophers were. I don't understand what he's saying, but he's really smart. I'm not talking about God here. I'm talking about your faith. From Abraham's day throughout history, God demonstrated himself to the Jews with signs and miracles. So that's what they looked for then. Paul said that. But they didn't recognize the miracles that Jesus performed. Sometimes people have to believe before they can realize the actual miracle itself. So, are you like the Greeks? You want something you can't understand because it's really smart? Or you like the Jews? You want signs and wonders and miracles? I'm not going to believe unless I see signs and wonders and miracles, and then I'm not going to believe anyway. The Jews were offended by Paul's teaching about Jesus being crucified, and the Gentiles thought it was ridiculous, like a children's nursery rhyme or something. I'm a little discouraged by the New Living Translation here in verse 21. They have it say this: God in his wisdom saw to it that the world would never know him through human wisdom. I kind of get it. I don't disagree with it, but it's a rather poor translation in my opinion, and I'm not basing that just on myself, but also on the original Greek and many other well-known translations. Most of them say something like the New International Version, which says, "Since in the wisdom of God, the world through its wisdom did not know him." Not that God made it so that we couldn't know him through our wisdom. Not important, but I think a translation should translate, not preach. Leave that to me. But again, I'll remind you to use at least 2 or 3 respected translations when you study the Bible. if you're just reading to learn about the stories of the Bible or the general context, reading one translation is fine. And do not think I am anti-New Living Translation. It is indeed one of my favorite translations. It's my wife's favorite by far. And no translation's perfect, and I've found many examples, and I bring them up every once in a while. But the basic truth of the gospel is in almost every translation. There are a few rather poor translations. Avoid those. But again, I'll name my favorites. I use the New American Standard as my primary. I don't preach from it. It's a little awkward for people to understand. The language is rather stilted. But the New American Standard is a great Bible. New King James, nothing wrong with that one. Well, probably have some mistakes I point out once in a while, but it's a great translation. But I recommend New American Standard, New King James, New Living Translation, New International Version, and the Message Bible, which is a paraphrase. Better than mine probably, but it's a little more offbeat. The Living Bible is a pretty good paraphrase. So most of that was written by one man, like I'm doing. Those are probably not the best paraphrases to use. That's why I strongly recommend you use others. All right, moving on. Verses 24 to 25. On the other hand, to those God has brought salvation, Jews and Greeks alike, Christ is the true power and wisdom of God. God's so-called foolishness is wiser than the greatest wisdom of humans, and God's so-called weakness is vastly stronger than the greatest strength of humans. I've got 2 points here. No, 3 points. Make it 3. I want to ask you, are they true in your life? First point, Christ is the power of God. Do you believe? Do you live experiencing God's power? You can, You can, if you seek it. Point 2, Christ is the wisdom of God. Do you trust God's wisdom? Or do you forget to trust Him? Point number 3, God's so-called weakness is stronger than the greatest of human strength. Do you trust His strength? Or do you try to take care of your problems and forget about God until you're in desperate need? Verses 26 to 29. Brothers and sisters, remember what you were like when you first heard the gospel? Most of you were not considered wise by most people. Most of you were not considered influential by most people. Most of you were not born into a royal family. However, God chose the foolishness of the world to shame what people considered wise. God chose what the world considered weak in order to shame what people considered strong. God chose what people despise and dismiss to blow away everything people think so important. That is why no one at all can boast about themselves to God. Why did Paul say, few of you are wise in the world's eyes, or powerful or wealthy? He was talking to the Corinthian Christians. What was he implying or stating? I want to reread verses 20 to 25 and then read 26 to 29. See if it makes sense. So where does that leave the highly educated, the truly intelligent, the great debaters in our society? God has now made all of them look foolish. That is because the wisdom of God demonstrated the world did not know Him. He used our foolish preaching, as others call it, to bring salvation to everyone who believes in Him. The Jews demand miracles and the Greeks look for logical wisdom. So when we preach that Christ was crucified, the Jews can't wrap their minds around it, and the Gentiles consider that ridiculous. On the other hand, to those God has brought salvation, Jews and Greeks alike, Christ is the true power and wisdom of God. God's so-called foolishness is wiser than the greatest wisdom of humans, and God's so-called weakness is vastly stronger than the greatest of human strength. Brothers and sisters, remember what you were like when you first heard the gospel. Most of you were not considered wise by most people. Most of you were not considered influential by most people. Most of you were not born into a royal family. However, God chose the foolishness of the world to shame what people considered wise. God chose what the world considered weak in order to shame what people considered strong. God chose what people despise and dismiss to blow away everything people think so important. That is why no one at all can boast about themselves to God. Do most people consider you highly educated? Not most of the people. I graduated high school. Took a little college, no degree. Most people wouldn't call me highly educated. Truly intelligent? Are you considered by most people the most intelligent person in their circle? A few of us might be, not most of us. Are you a great debater? Can you do give and take with somebody about topics and be very persuasive? Not to convince them, but to convince the audience? Well, God made all those people seem foolish. But here's what I know. The wise people of the world are very unlikely to accept Christ. The powerful people of the world are very unlikely to accept Christ. The wealthy people of the world are very unlikely to accept Christ. Why is that? Think about it for a moment. What do you think? Why do they not want to accept Christ? Do you think it's because they do not feel they need God for any reason? That they don't need any help in their life? I've found it much easier to share the gospel with people less fortunate than when I tried to share with my co-workers who made better than average money and felt like their lives were fine. Hold on for a minute. Does it work the other way around? What do I mean? Does Paul imply that if our lives are not considered foolish by non-believers, that we are not actually living the message of the cross? Think about that. If we are living the message of the cross, should people think we're foolish? I try and live the message of the cross, and I've got to tell you, people, there's Christians that think I'm foolish for the way I live, for what I do. Not boasting here, just giving you a fact, but today my wife and I went out for lunch. We went to a buffet, paid $31 and something, and I used my credit card, and I just made a line through the tip section because I put a $20 bill on the table for a buffet. A $30 buffet, I paid $20 tip. People saying, that's foolish. And my wife looked at me, why? I don't know. I'm a generous tipper, but not like that. Why? Why did I do it? Well, people are going to call me foolish. I've given away all our money. Now I'm working on giving away all the money that comes into the church, and I'm pretty good at it. Last night I got a request from somebody in prison that his family living in the Virgin Islands just got devastated by a major storm. He asked if I could help him. I got nothing. I've got nothing. All right. Verses 30 to 31. Therefore, because we have been united with Christ, he has brought God's wisdom to us. He makes us right with God. He makes us holy and redeemed. That is exactly why the scriptures say, let anyone who boasts about nothing except our Lord. So that quotes from Jeremiah 9:24. I just like to look up when the New Testament quotes the Old Testament. I like to look it up, read the context around it. Sometimes it doesn't exactly apply, but taken out of context, it kind of makes sense in another way. Do you do that? It's a good thing to do. That's what the cross-reference is for. So Paul finishes this chapter talking about wisdom and foolishness. You know, there's a lot in this section, and most people love this section because it's talking about those people. It's talking about God's wisdom and man's foolishness, and we know that isn't us because we believe God to be wise. But read it again. Nowhere does it say he's talking about man equals unbelievers. Does Paul seem to be indicating that even Christians do not understand what he is teaching? After all, he was writing to Christians. What do you think? Now, don't forget, Paul started this section talking about divisions. Wouldn't we be much wiser if we didn't have divisions? Does that mean we're foolish because we have divisions? I don't know, you decide. He finishes in verse 30 with, God has united you with Christ Jesus. Oh, I love hearing that. Don't you? Divisions. United. With God, Paul's lesson in between. I think we need to seriously consider this chapter. Please go reread it. Watch this video one more time. Take some notes. Write some questions. You can ask me the questions. You can put them in the comments on Facebook. You can put them in the comments on YouTube. You can send them to me by email, pastorvelcro@ihcc.com, pastorvelcro@ironhorsecommunitychurch.com, either one. Or if you have, I have other email addresses. If you've got one, use it. My phone number is 307-256-9324. If you want to ask questions, I love to talk about it with you. God bless you. Thank you for watching this. And again, you know, I would love to have somebody say, I watched the whole thing. Make my heart thump. Maybe a heart thump. Oh, I love you so much. Thank you. May God richly bless you. Amen.